I'm just going to go over some of the techniques. So if you want to get a flat wash, lay down some water and then pick up pigment. And again, let the water do the work. Just spread it out a little bit, and then as it dries, it'll smooth out. So that's with wetting the paper first. If I want to do a wash but not on wet paper, you can also do that wet on dry, but it looks different. It gives you a little bit more control on the edges. If you want to try it that way, but sometimes it's harder to get it smooth if you don't work fast enough. So I'm just going to add a little bit more water and smooth that pigment out. Okay, and again, you guys don't want to scrub your paper too long because it will start to pill up like an old little sweater. Okay. And then for a graded wash, I like to start with just a little bit of water on the one side where I want it darker. Pick up my pigment. I'll rinse my brush a little bit. And then blend that out to just water. If you ever feel like, oh, I don't like that, again, paper towel, and you can remove the pigment. It's almost like an eraser. So while it's still wet, if something got too dark or out of control there, you just wipe it away with paper towel, dab it away with paper towel. That's probably not the best color to use for a graded wash, but that's okay. So variegated wash is where you're going from one color to another. So again, I like to get the area I'm painting wet. So wet on wet. And I'll do a little green on this side. And then I'll do a little bit of a blue on this side. And then you can kind of see, like, as it's drying, the water is doing the work of blending for you. You don't have to work that hard. And if you decide you want to go a little darker on one side, you can. So those are your basic washes. And then, you know, something important that we've talked about is wet and wet and wet on dry. So if I paint this, actually, do the same color so you guys can see. So I'm going to paint this square orange just like the one above it. More water. And let's say I'm impatient and I want to paint something in there while it's still wet. I'm going to lose control over my paint. And you can see that it's just bleeding everywhere. And I don't have a hard edge. Now this might be an effect you want to accomplish in your painting, and that's okay too, you know, so you just have to figure out what look you want. So then the wet on dry, so this is pretty much dry. And if I do the same thing, you can see the difference in that line. And, you know, wherever it's wet, if you just kind of drop in more paint, you know, there's like that surface tension with the water, so it like doesn't let the paint go everywhere, which is kind of cool. Like I could go here and just like drop in a little bit. Like, as it dries, it'll do some cute things. Anyway, okay, so that's that. Wet and wet, wet and dry. I'm gonna do some stripes over here. I'll do them in primary colors. So glazing, because watercolor is a transparent medium, you can layer colors. And remember, this is watercolor, so we want to use water when we're painting. You're not just using a slightly damp brush to pick up the pigment, you're using a wet brush. Okay. And then I'll do a blue stripe. And I'll come back to that in a minute once that dries. A little darker. Okay. So for the salt, which is something people tend to like, I like to get the paper wet, pick up different colors. This is also like right what I'm doing right now. You can just leave this and this would be a watercolor bloom. But while the paint is still shiny and wet, sitting on top of the paper, and it hasn't soaked in yet, that's when you want to sprinkle on your salts. And this takes practice to figure out, and like this might not work the way I wanted it to. You know, sometimes it's hit or miss with watercolor. But you gotta make it work. All right. What else can I do? Oh, let's do bubble wrap. So bubble wrap and saran wrap work in the same way. So you can take a little piece of saran wrap and crinkle it up. Or you can use bubble wrap. Big bubble wrap, little bubble wrap, doesn't matter. But again, while it's still wet, bubble wrap is the bubbly side. I'm going to put it side down, press it on. You just want to let it sit there. Even put something on it to hold it down, let it dry. Okay. The masking we've talked about. You can use masking tape, you can use masking fluid, you can use stickers, you can use pretty much anything. Tape. But if you want hard edges, you could use cut out different shapes. You could tear it into different designs, whatever you want to do. But wherever the masking tape goes, it will prevent the paint from going. And again, you can do this with crayons too. It's a resist technically, and then this is the masking fluid, which will give you fine control, and you can do like little detail stuff. So this is, you know, for really fine stuff. We're not going to cover up half of our painting that we want to leave white. If we want to leave a lot of it white, we just avoid it. We just are careful. So you got to let that dry, and then I'll paint that. But as far as like background stuff, you know, if you wanted to do you know, even something just as simple as this. Just let the colors blend and flow together. You can let that dry a little bit, come back to it. You could splatter on the rubbing alcohol. Let me grab the rubbing alcohol actually. So this tends to work better on sort of more concentrated pigment. So I'm going to add some more pigment. And then you want to get a clean, dry brush and rubbing alcohol, and you can just drop it on. And as it dries, see if I can get a big drop. There we go. So because rubbing alcohol has a different evaporating time than water does, it will create some interesting patterns. And you could do that also with, let's see, we could do it with a flat wash too. So like, let's just get some blue down so you can really see what happens. Let it dry a little bit. Okay, so that's the rubbing alcohol. Let's go back to glazing. They should be dry. Okay. So with the glazing, you know, if I take that transparent yellow and just go this way, and you can see where the yellow overlaps in the blue, in the red and the blue, you can see, you know, oranges and greens coming through. Get some red. Do some orange too, why not? But this is the whole idea. So if you're layering colors and building up the transparency or the opacity of the colors, you know, the depth of the colors, that's where you get the interesting things happening in your piece. Let's try purple too. Why not? Okay, so that's glazing, and you can see what happens when you have the regular purple just against the white background versus red, or the teal against the white versus red or blue, and how that changes the color. So keep that in mind as you're layering your paints, okay? So I think I'm going to move this guy over, go back to my fox.